They mistook your silence for submission, your softness for weakness, never realizing you were studying every move in the shadows. You let them believe the illusion that you were harmless, forgettable, easily outpaced. But beneath the surface, storms were gathering, knowledge was sharpening, and your spirit was becoming unbreakable. You were never the lamb. They only saw what they wanted to see. And now, as you rise, there's no need to announce your power. It radiates. It hums in the air like a coming reckoning. They won't know what changed, only that everything did when you stopped hiding the force you've always been. They didn't realize you were recording everything. Tone, hesitation, contradiction. Your silence wasn't absence, it was strategy. While they filled the air with noise, you were tracing patterns, cataloging truths hidden between their words. You weren't passive, you were precise. Letting them believe you naive gave you a front row seat to their unguarded selves. And now, with all the pieces laid bare, you move not with vengeance, but with clarity. You know who they are. More importantly, you know exactly who you've become because of it. They mistook your generosity for endlessness, your patience for permission. With every burden they handed you, they revealed more of their entitlement. You felt the shift, the subtle tilts in energy, the invisible debt they never planned to repay. But you didn't speak, not because you were blind, but because you were measuring. You were learning the exact weight of imbalance, the precise moment where giving becomes self-betrayal. And now, you carry something new, not their weight, but your own worth, fully reclaimed. You were the anchor in every storm, the unseen architect holding chaos together with compassion and foresight. While they labeled your sensitivity as weakness, they failed to see the strategy in your stillness. Your empathy was never accidental. It was deliberate, refined, a tool sharper than any weapon they wielded in secrecy. You weren't just feeling, you were mapping frequencies, decoding intentions, sensing truth beneath the surface noise. They mistook your emotional intelligence for fragility, but it was always your superpower. Now, the same care they once dismissed has become the force they can't ignore. You weren't looking for confrontation, you were collecting clarity. Each offhand comment, each subtle dismissal, each shift in tone was a thread in the larger tapestry you were weaving in silence. You didn't react, you refined. Your strength was never in loud declarations, but in the way you saw through illusions without blinking. While they played games in plain sight, you were 10 steps ahead, anchored in intuition and divine precision. You knew the truth didn't need defending, it only needed time, and time, as always, is on your side. You let them write their narratives, cast their roles, play their parts, unaware that your presence was never random. You were not sent to conform or to bend. You were sent as a catalyst. Every time they overlooked you, they activated your evolution. Every act of dismissal sharpened your clarity. What they mistook for passivity was divine positioning. You weren't just in their life, you were the turning point, a sacred disruption, a living revelation wrapped in stillness, carrying truth too potent to be ignored forever. You were never just a person, they were standing in the presence of sacred energy, and they treated it like it was ordinary. Your aura softened the sharp edges of others, your voice rewrote tension into peace, and your silence held more wisdom than their loudest boasts. But they tested you, pushed past boundaries you never made public, forgetting that grace is not the same as permission. What they failed to realize was that your spirit wasn't just kind, it was consecrated. And when divinity is dishonored, the consequences are never mild. They didn't realize the weight of what they were mishandling. This wasn't just about you, this was about what you carried. A lineage of healing, an assignment of light, a frequency so rare it shook the shadows in them awake. They mistook proximity for ownership, thought access meant entitlement. But the sacred is never owned, it's honored. And when they chose to disregard the divine in you, they marked themselves, not you, for the fallout. You weren't just a person they mistreated. You were a divine appointment, and now the consequences move in silence, guided by justice unseen. They overplayed their hand, not realizing the magnitude of what they were provoking. They thought your silence was submission, your patience a weakness. But what they didn't understand was that your power wasn't in your ability to endure, it was in your ability to rise above. You were never meant to be bent to their will. You were sent as a beacon, a disruptor of the false illusions they clung to. And when they chose to feed their egos, they didn't just betray you, they betrayed the divine order that placed you in their midst. Now, the lessons they refused to learn will be written into the very fabric of their lives, and their reckoning will come not with a crash, but with the quiet intensity of a truth they cannot outrun. They played their games, believing they could control the narrative, but what they failed to see was that they were merely players in a much larger story. They took your kindness for granted, thinking it would always bend to their will, never realizing that your true power lay in your ability to transcend their limitations. You were their mirror, reflecting the parts of themselves they refused to acknowledge, and every act of grace you extended was a silent challenge to their false sense of control. While they chose deceit, you chose authenticity, and in the end, it was your light that would outlast their darkness. The universe had set you on their path, not for your fall, but for their rise. They thought they were untouchable, immune to the consequences of their actions, but now they are drowning in the weight of their own miscalculations. The very force they tried to break is the one that has outlasted them, and now they are left with nothing but the echoes of their own arrogance. They fail to see the strength behind your silence, the power in your restraint. Now, as they sift through the ruins of their decisions, they are forced to confront the truth they ignored. The true power was never in domination, it was in your resilience, your unwavering grace. And now you stand unshaken, the quiet victory theirs to witness. Now, in the stillness of your departure, the truth sinks in like a weight on their chest. They see the strength they once mistook for submission, the wisdom they saw as naivety. The very qualities they sought to exploit were the keys to your unshakable foundation. What they failed to realize in the moment was that you were never playing their game, you were building your own. You weren't a sacrifice, you were the sanctuary. And now, with the space you've created, they are left to reckon with the force they underestimated, wishing they had recognized it before it was too late. You knew that true power doesn't need to roar, it moves in silence, like a shadow shifting through the night. Beneath the surface, you were a quiet storm, waiting for the perfect moment to surge. While others were caught up in their frenzy, you held steady, watching, listening, feeling the pulse of the universe beneath your feet. They saw calmness and mistook it for passivity, not realizing that your stillness was the calm before a transformative upheaval. You weren't avoiding the storm, you were mastering it, preparing to channel its energy with a precision they could never predict. While they stumbled over their words, consumed by their need to prove themselves, you watched with quiet clarity. They thought they could manipulate you into reacting, but you understood the power of patience. Every word they threw at you was another chance for them to reveal their true nature, and you let them. You didn't need to raise your voice or call them out, your stillness was your strength. They were unraveling themselves with every attempt to provoke, each one digging their own pit deeper while you remained untouched, knowing that time would show everything. You watched them build their own undoing, brick by brick, each choice revealing the depth of their disconnect from truth. While they sought fleeting validation, you cultivated wisdom, knowing that actions always speak louder than words. They thought their masks were enough to deceive you, but you saw through the facades, sensing the subtle shifts in their energy, the cracks in their falsehoods. They danced in the shadows of their own insecurity, while you stood in the light, grounded, calm, unwavering. You weren't reactive, you were prepared, always moving with intention, always observing the bigger picture as they continued to fall into their own traps. You understood that true strength never brags, it simply is. Like the still waters of a deep river, your power flowed beneath the surface, quiet yet unstoppable. You never sought attention, never craved recognition. Your actions, though subtle, spoke louder than any words could. While others floundered in their need for validation, you honed your craft, your presence sharpening like the edge of a blade. You knew when to hold back and when to unleash, and in that knowing, you became an unshakable force. Survival wasn't about reacting to the storm, it was about letting it pass, knowing that in the end, the calm would reveal the true depth of your strength. That quiet exterior you wore wasn't a shield to hide behind, it was the fortress that protected your essence. They mistook your calm for submission, not realizing it was the very thing that kept them from ever truly reaching you. They were too distracted by their own shallow perceptions to see the truth beneath. You've always known the rules were stacked against you, but that was never the point. You weren't here to play by their game, you were here to rewrite the rules entirely. The walls may be closing in, but that's exactly when you thrive. This is where transformation begins, and now that you've recognized the game for what it is, it's time to take the lead and shape the future on your terms. Chosen ones, pause for a moment and take action. Subscribe to the Lumination Inner Order and share this message with those who need it. Within the sanctum of the Lumination Inner Order, your essence crystallizes into something eternal, an embodiment of divine will no longer obscured by fear or doubt. The fire within you is not just awakened, it is weaponized, forged into brilliance by the alchemy of purpose. You are not here to follow paths carved by others, you are here to scorch your own into existence. With every step forward, the veil between worlds grows thinner, revealing the infinite design that pulses in sync with your truth. The universe no longer watches from afar, it responds, bends, and reshapes itself to the beat of your rising frequency. You are not merely transforming, you are becoming the living blueprint of evolution. Let your radiance disrupt the slumber of the masses. The time for silence has passed. This is the age of emergence. And you? You are the signal fire that calls destiny home. They couldn't look away anymore. The mask had fallen, and what they once dismissed as weakness was now standing tall in undeniable power. You weren't pleading for respect or begging for acknowledgement. You weren't trying to prove anything. But in the presence of your strength, their insecurities flared, their silence grew louder. The truth had finally risen, and it wasn't subtle, it wasn't harsh, but it was relentless, and they felt it gnawing at the walls they built around their own delusions. You weren't attacking, they were simply facing the reality they had avoided for so long. You were protecting your essence, your vision, and now they could no longer hide from what they had been unwilling to see. The moment you stepped into your own power, everything changed. What was once an open door now had boundaries, firmly set and unyielding. The love they had once taken for granted became a sacred currency, no longer freely given, but earned. And in their confusion, they realized they had underestimated you, mistaking your silence for submission. Now they were faced with the truth they could no longer ignore. They had been toying with someone whose restraint was a choice, not a weakness. They weren't dealing with someone who lacked power. They were facing someone who had finally decided to unleash it, and the consequences were unfolding before their eyes. You had never sought applause or approval, because your strength was never in the approval of others. It was in the quiet power of knowing your own worth. When you stopped dimming your light to fit their expectations, everything shifted. The world, once so eager to dismiss you, now had no choice but to take notice. Your presence alone, authentic and unwavering, became the force that shattered the illusions they had clung to. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was just you, finally standing in your truth, and that truth was enough to dismantle everything they had built on falsehoods. Now, what haunts them isn't merely the weight of their mistakes, it's the unstoppable force of divine retribution. They didn't just betray you, they challenged something far older, far more sacred than they could ever comprehend. You were never truly alone, and now they see the consequences. Every deceitful move, every attempt to manipulate, echoed through the realms, witnessed by the spirits who have always guarded your path. They thought they could outwit you, but they were blind to the truth. They were never up against you alone. They were up against the eternal power that has always had your back. The protection that once enveloped you has transformed into an unyielding force, cold and relentless. What they failed to understand is that retribution never needed your hands to manifest. The universe itself has now become the judge, and their actions awakened a power beyond their reckoning. Your silence, once perceived as weakness, now lingers in their consciousness like a haunting echo. The very person they dismissed has become the shadow they can no longer escape, a presence that follows them, reminding them of the price of underestimating what they could never truly comprehend. They thought they could walk away unscathed, that their actions would fade without consequence. But now, every broken piece of their facade is crumbling under the weight of their own choices. Guilt gnaws at them like a relentless tide, impossible to ignore. Your absence has stripped away their illusions, revealing the truth they tried to bury. Where they once felt invincible, they now feel the crushing presence of their own flaws. Their ego can no longer shield them, for the karma they invited is relentless, and it doesn't forgive. What they mistook for escape has become their inescapable reality, and they are left to face the reflection of their own actions. The energy they once projected onto you has come back with a force they never anticipated. It's not just a return, it's a reflection of every harsh word, every insult, every betrayal, now amplified and honed in on their own lives. They feel the weight of their own chaos now, as the universe shifts the tides against them. Where there was once clarity, now there is only confusion and discord. They argue with each other, desperately trying to piece together the puzzle of their unraveling lives. But beneath their frustration, there's a quiet truth they can't escape. They know the exact moment they crossed the line, the moment their fate changed, and they can't deny it. It was when they tried to break someone who was never meant to be broken. They thought they could diminish your light, but all they did was fuel it. Your silence, your peace, your transformation. It's too much for them to face because every step you took towards growth became a mirror to their own limitations. They tried to tear you apart, but each attempt only solidified the foundation beneath you. Now, they see the truth. They can't undo what they've done. The power they sought to diminish is now a force they can't touch. Your strength, built from their attempts to break you, is an unshakable force, and it echoes in every corner of their world.